I have ridden across the cliffs of Stormvale in every weather England cares to conjure. I have seen the sea throw itself at those chalk walls in November, heard the wind strip the voices from my groomsmen, as though words were an indulgence it would not permit. I thought I knew that road. I was wrong about that too. The morning Rowena Farren nearly went over the edge of it. She had no business being on the Throwick Road at all. That was the first thing I thought when I rounded the upper bend and saw the coach ahead of me, a hired vehicle, cheap-sprung, badly matched horses, already beginning its terrible drift toward the stone rail. The lead horse had shied at something, a rabbit or a shadow or its own monstrous cowardice, and the pair behind it had caught the panic like fire catching paper. They were running now, not in the disciplined fear of trained animals, but in the blind, careening terror of beasts that have forgotten the weight of what they drag. My own mount, read it before I did, gathered beneath me, ears flat, and I gave him everything he asked for. I had seen Miss Farren twice before that morning, once at Throwick village, where she had been arguing, there is no softer word, with the coachman about the condition of his wheel hubs before she would board. Once at the crossroads when I had slowed to let the coach pass, and she had glanced from the window at me with the frank, measuring look a woman uses when she has decided she does not intend to be impressed. She had her mother's red trunk on the roof. She was going somewhere she had chosen, and she was going to it on her own terms. I knew who she was. Everyone in 3 parishes knew who she was. The Farrens of Riddergate had lost the estate the previous autumn, and Rowena Farren, eldest daughter, the one her mother called too much and her brother called the difficult one, had spent the winter arranging her own future without asking anyone's leave. She had secured a position. She was going to take it. That, too, I had already known and already found troubling, though I would not have told you why. The cliff rail appeared ahead, a low limestone boundary between the road and 200 feet of nothing. The horses were not slowing. I heard her voice before I reached the coach door. She was not screaming. She was telling the coachman, through the hatch above her, exactly how to pull the left rein, exactly how to brace his knees, exactly the degree to which she thought his nerve had failed him. I could not hear his reply. I doubted he managed one. My horse drew level with the lead pair, and I did what I had done half a dozen times in the army, on roads that were also no place for a mistake. I leaned, caught the near horse's bridle, and pulled. The animal fought me for 6 terrible seconds. Then the sense of another weight, another will broke through the panic, and it began, grudgingly, furiously, to slow. The far side wheel caught the bottom of the stone rail. It did not breach it. The coach rocked, tilted, and stopped. There was a silence of the particular kind that follows a near thing, the wind still running, the sea audible below, the horses blowing hard. Then the coach door opened from the inside, which I had not expected, and Rowena Farren stepped down without assistance, her trunk pin trailing from her hair, her expression calibrating something I could not immediately name. She looked at the wheel, she looked at the rail, she looked at me. "You pulled too soon," she said. Another 3 yards and the lead horse would have turned on its own. I stared at her. "You are welcome," I said. "I am not ungrateful," she said. "I am telling you what I observed." It was, I would later reflect, a precise summary of every conversation we ever had. I dismounted. My hands were still unsteady, which I minded, and which I did not let her see. The coachman climbed down, pale and sweating, and I dismissed him to check the wheel without quite raising my voice, because raising my voice at that moment would have meant using some of the air I was quietly struggling to locate. I was the Duke of Stormvale. I did not misplace air. "You are not injured," I said to Miss Farren. It was not a question. She was standing perfectly straight, and her colour, unlike the coachman's, had scarcely altered. "I am not," she confirmed. "Are you?" "No." "Good." She retrieved the trunk pin from her hair, examined it, and pinned her hair back up. "I suppose you will tell me I should not have been on this road without a proper escort." The thought had occurred to me. "You may keep it," she said pleasantly, "and I will keep my position at Harrowfield, and we will both be satisfied. I should have let her go. The wheel was sound, the horses calmed, the road ahead clear. She had a hired coach and a destination and a competence that wanted none of my opinion. I should have remounted and continued south, where I had been going before she nearly went over a cliff and spoke to me, as though I were a slightly slow student in need of gentle correction. Harrowfield, I said. Yes. That is 4 miles past Stormvale. I am aware of the geography of the county, Your Grace. Then you are aware, I said, that the road passes the estate and that I am going that direction. She looked at me with those considering eyes. You are offering to ride escort. I am offering to ride escort. A pause. On the cliff below us a gull dropped from sight and was gone. The coachman will think. I expect, I said, that the coachman is thinking about his wheel. She pressed her lips together, and for one moment something crossed her face that might, under different circumstances, have been amusement. Very well, Your Grace. We did not speak much for the first mile. I rode alongside the coach at a walk, the horses mercifully calm now, the cliff road wide enough in daylight to feel less like a test of character. But I watched her through the window when she did not know it, or perhaps when she permitted me to think she did not. She sat with her spine straight and her hands folded in her lap, and she looked at the sea the way I had seen men look at the sea who had crossed it in danger and were not afraid of it, but were not unaware of it either. On the second mile she opened the window. You were in the Marlowe campaign, she said. I have heard you were not cautious there either. Where did you hear that? My brother writes letters. He served under Lord Penwick. A pause. He said you rode into the defile alone. The situation required it. Yes, she said. That is what he said you said. She was quiet for a moment. I have always thought that doing a necessary thing alone is not quite the same as being reckless. I looked at her then, properly, the way I had been careful not to do since the cliff. No, I said, it is not quite the same. We reached the Stormvale gates as the afternoon light began to bronze the fields. She should have continued. The coachman started to, and then she said something brief through the hatch, and the coach stopped. She put her head out of the window and looked at the gates, at the stone pillars, the griffins, the long cedar-lined approach. Then she looked at me. I have heard it is very old, she said. 400 years. Is it what you expected? She asked. When you inherited it, was it what you expected? It was a strange question. Most people did not ask me questions about expecting things. They told me what I had and congratulated me on having it. I thought about lying, because lying was tidier, and then I decided against it, because she would probably notice. No, I said. It was lonelier than I expected. She held my gaze for a moment that lasted somewhat longer than the road required. Then it was honest, she said. Lonelier things usually are. The coach moved on. I sat at my gate and watched it go. I did not call on Harrowfield that week. I called on it the week following, on the pretext of business with Colonel Ashwick that did not, on examination, require my personal attendance. She was in the garden when I arrived, arguing with a rose arbor that had made certain structural decisions she disagreed with, and she looked up at me with the measuring expression I had already learned meant she was deciding what version of the truth to give me. She gave me the honest one, as it turned out. She always did. I proposed at Stormvale in late October, in the Cedar Walk, in the particular gold of that light. She heard me out all of it, not just the formal portion, but the part that came after, the part I had not intended to say, about the loneliness and the gates and the moment on the cliff road when I had understood, with the clarity that comes only from genuine fear, what it would mean to have lost her before I had found her. She was quiet for long enough that I began, for the first time in a great many years, to be uncertain of the outcome. I would need to keep the position at Harrowfield, she said at last, for 6 months, until they can find someone suitable. Of course, I said. And I would need to ride out this road, she said, without escort, when I choose to. I will have the stone rail reinforced, I said. She looked at me, and the thing that had crossed her face on the cliff road, the thing that might have been amusement, came all the way through this time. Yes, she said, I suppose you will. We married in November at the small church in Throwick, with her brother and my steward and the coachman who had finally checked his wheel hubs as our witnesses. She wore the same plain travelling dress she had been wearing the morning the horses bolted. She said it seemed appropriate. I have never, in all the years since, been able to argue with her logic. I have tried. She tells me what she observes, and she is nearly always right, and I have learned, slowly, imperfectly, with a great deal of practice, that this is not the same as a defeat. It is, in fact, the best thing that ever happened to me on the Throwick road, which is saying a great deal, given the road.